female. Women are more connected with their body, so often body awareness is easier for women than for men. Another aspect of it is that the female principle in the universe is the receptive principle, is the allowing principle. It's the principle that's expressed through a gesture that you find sometimes in Mary or other female figures from other cultures. The gesture of like this, holding, nurturing, allowing is the female. And so, as such, it should be easier for a woman to allow what is to be and to contain it in that space of aware presence, to be the container for what happens. So I may have mentioned briefly in The Power of Now that in some ways one could say women are closer to realization. It should and could be easier for women. And this is all it's happening now. There's quite an acceleration in the development of women that sometimes surpasses that of men. Here perhaps the number of men and women is equal, more or less, but there are some groups in which 2/3, not uncommon, 2/3 of the participants are female. Many teachers are rising now, female teachers, and that is wonderful to see. There's a great demand for that. The female principle on the whole, of course, will come back very strongly. It's part of what will save the world from an overemphasis on mind, on the male. Balance needs to re-establish itself. But it is ultimately not our destiny to recreate female deities or anything. That can be a little temporary way of reaching that which is beyond form, but it's not our destiny to recreate that. But really, it's both for the man and the woman to find within themselves that which is beyond male and female. Honoring the form that they are, temporarily, yes, but finding that which is beyond. It is where the two are one. At some point they split, and one became two, the Big Bang. Male, female. One became two. Two. You may know the Indian teaching of Advaita, which means not two, non-duality, there's only one. Quite a beautiful teaching, as long as it doesn't become an intellectual game or debating society. But otherwise, a profound teaching. That ultimately there's one. There's only one. The essential nature of life is oneness. And duality is to do with the manifested world, the sense-perceived world, not ultimate reality. There's wisdom embedded in language. So if you look at Advaita, the syllable I don't know very much Sanskrit, but means no, it denies. Dvai, it comes from the Sanskrit two, which is the German word zwei. Danish may be similar, I don't know. For two, comes from Alt Sanskrit, because many words in our European languages go back to India. Nobody knows how and why. Zwei is two, and related to that zwei are other words like Verzweiflung, despair, Zweifel, doubt. These are all words that are based on the number two. So you can see, with duality comes despair, comes doubt, comes me and the other, the separation. And that it's amazing how to see that certain words contain wisdom.
I would like to ask on the matter of emotions. You've been talking about it today, but I would like to ask about the expression of emotions. From my own personal history, I can say that I believe I'm better at presence after I've started being able to express anger, for instance. And I see my children, they are very present, and then they get angry and they're angry and away it goes.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been talking very much about insight and just noticing.
Yes. Thank you. Good question. Thank you. There are quite a few people who do not express emotions fully or don't express them at all. Perhaps even more so in northern countries. The further north you go, the less they express their emotions. That's how it seems to be. Maybe it's too cold to express your emotions. Now, the practice I describe of observing your emotions, allowing them to be, for somebody who habitually does not express emotions, it is not usually the best way to try and observe his or her emotions, because they may not even know what emotions they are having. They may be so much pushed down. So particularly for those people who have been suppressing emotions, it is very helpful to express the emotions, if possible without injuring anybody or yourself, to allow yourself to express emotions and witness that at the same time. The expression itself would not free you, because emotions, if they are not observed and not witnessed, tend to renew themselves through renewed thinking, because there's this vicious circle between emotion and thought processes. So the expression alone is not enough, because you would simply be stuck with it and express the anger, because the anger dissipates somewhat as you express it. But if you are not conscious of the relationship between your thought processes and the anger, the thought processes will create renewed anger. And so you would be going to the same or other therapists and hitting the pillows for 20 or 30 years, not realizing that through your thought processes you're continuously recreating emotion and you're identifying so much. So without the presence, expression is better than repression. Repression can make you ill. But to transcend, it is essential to be alert and present and watch it as an energy field, so that through the watching it becomes depersonalized, so that you don't feel you're not totally stuck in it. And then you can express it, hit something, not a person if possible, the pillow if it's anger, or scream, and it feels good perhaps, and feel the raw energy of it like fire, and feel it, wow. And if you allow it completely and express it, it can even very quickly turn around, and then you can do something useful, that you have enormous energy, and suddenly it gets turned around and it's no longer, it can shift from anger to just being intense energy. Okay, now I'm going to clean my room. Not angry anymore, simply with energy. You could also clean your room still being angry, but that's not good cleaning, because you would be cleaning on the material level, and on an energetic level you would be polluting your room. And so to become free, for a while some people need to express fully, and then a time comes when there's enough presence and you have expressed it, then you can gradually more and more work on the inner level. and bring presence to it on the inner. Not that you ever hold it down. If it wants to and needs to express itself, you may do something. Maybe you can transform it into physical movement, vigorous movement, or whatever it is, and watch, but always be there as the witness. At some point, you find that you have a choice. The emotion arises, you can express it or not express it. And it can simply be transformed or transmuted through bringing presence to it. You will know in the moment whether it needs to express itself or not. If you have never or rarely expressed emotion, then by all means allow yourself to express it without indulging and without personalizing it. Recognizing it as energy, no more, just energy, and watch. And so, yes, northern people, English, German, Scandinavian, are not usually that outgoing. I heard a little joke, I hope nobody's offended by it. It concerns one of the Scandinavian countries, doesn't matter which. And it says, I mean, maybe it's a famous joke, I don't know. They're like ketchup bottles, you know, like Heinz ketchup, you have to shake. First nothing comes out, and then it comes all at once. Flop.
There's a little four-letter word that hasn't been mentioned at all throughout this weekend, and that is love.
Thank you.
Now, if I can just turn that into a question rather than a statement, in the position of witness, where is love?
Thank you. Love, together with a three-letter word, God. Maybe those two are the most misused words of the language. Now, I may have mentioned the word God once or twice here. In some gatherings, that word also is never mentioned. I believe I said you are God in disguise. So I usually avoid both love and God, because they are naturally present when you are present. Because your presence is the presence of God in this world. The light of consciousness is the light of the One. And love is what naturally arises out of the space of presence when the other is no longer seen as other. When the separation that comes from being identified with thought, that sense of separation between me and the other, being trapped in a form and identifying with a form, then you cannot recognize the other as ultimately one with yourself. And when you cannot recognize the other as deep down, one with yourself, you cannot sense the oneness. All you see is the otherness. That's the egoic state. All you see in other humans is their otherness. And that's not a pleasant reality. That's why Jean-Paul Sartre said, hell is other people. It's the ego speaking. So when you are identified with form, you see only another form. There is no realization of connectedness, or that you are the realization that you are an expression of the same one life, the same one consciousness in another temporary form. You don't know it. All you can see is the other. And so the more deeply you are identified with form, the more suffering there is. And if there is such a thing as evil, as an abstract thing, we could say it is complete identification with form. And that is no more than the complete absence of the realization, or even an inkling of oneness. Now, there are many humans who are identified with form, but not totally. So there is an inkling, there is some sensing of oneness, so they can sometimes selflessly help someone or feel the other person's suffering, have empathy with another human being. So love is, of course, the realization that there is no other. Love arises out of the recognition of one. Really, love is the realization one. We are one, ultimately. And you cannot do that when you meet another human being through thought. Because thought separates, divides, classifies. So our entire gathering is about the arising of a state of consciousness, the only state of consciousness in which love becomes possible as a natural and an integral part of that state of consciousness. Love comes out of the spaciousness when you realize you're not the form, but the formless one life. And everything else also is not the form. It's only a temporary appearance. It's the formless one life. Wow, it's me. You're looking at yourself. That's love. Meeting the other as yourself. And so the only reason why we haven't used the word is that it's been overused. And it's there naturally. It is possible that the Buddha never used any single positive term, like stating something like peace or love or even enlightenment. We don't know. He may not even have used that. Nobody knows exactly which sutras actually reflect his words. But probably he only pointed to the end of suffering. Maybe he said emptiness. He didn't need to say more. What is emptiness? Why is it that the Buddha always looks so peaceful? Of course, in the Buddha too there's love, because compassion, which is the emphasis that Buddhism puts on it, is really inseparable from love, because compassion is also the realization of oneness. It's just a different aspect of it. So love and compassion are really one. They're inseparable. So Buddhism looks at it more from the point of view of compassion, but really that's what love is. The German word for compassion is not so good. I don't know if there's another word, because it reduces it to something that's not quite as profound of what real compassion is. Mitleid is suffering with another person. But true compassion does not mean that you suffer with the other person. True compassion, and I mentioned it briefly in The Power of Now, arises from the realization of oneness, and then you're faced with a suffering human being. So you bring in the empathy with the suffering as this form, because you yourself are a form and you have experienced what suffering is. So you have empathy with the suffering of other life forms, because you yourself have known suffering, maybe still know it from time to time. That's you as the form. And then you are in touch with the stillness in yourself, the presence. Presence does not suffer. And you bring that to this encounter with another human being. The two come together. The empathy with the suffering of the other human being, which comes from identifying with form, it always goes back to that, and allowing that to be, and the deeper realization of the oneness of all life, and that ultimately who they are in the depths of their being cannot be touched by the suffering. And perhaps it is the suffering that will actually get them there. So compassion and love are one. There's no wanting in love. The misuse of love is because the ego uses the word. And to the ego, love is a kind of wanting. That is expressed very nicely in the Spanish language, where the word for I love you is the same as I want you. And of course that's very true as far as the ego is concerned. You look with love, with gentleness, with compassion upon the world. Stillness. You look upon a tree. You love that tree, not that you have to say it. It becomes reduced if you say, oh, I love that tree. It's deeper than, it's so much deeper than that. It reduces it, because I love is used so much in so many superficial senses. I love ice cream. I love suffering. Love is the essence of our gathering, and in order not to reduce it to a concept, I didn't mention the word.
A lot of Western therapeutic practices focuses on establishing a healthy sense of self. Now, according to a lot of spiritual teachings, including your own, the whole notion of a self is a construction. That's question number one. Is that so? And two, does that then make therapy and therapeutic practices in general futile?
Thank you. Thank you. There are, of course, a lot of therapeutic practices that do not get you beyond getting back to normality so that you can function relatively well in this world. They may cure you of a neurosis or whatever it is. They want the normal state, and normal means ultimately insane, so they bring you back to the normal state to normal insanity, and then you can go back and be a useful member of an insane civilization. But the question is interesting: do we need to go through the development and growth of ego before we can go beyond? And it does seem that yes, we need to go. So far it's been the case that most humans needed to go through the ego state. But at what stage of the development they jumped off, that varies. You could say, well, do we need to develop a fully functioning and healthy ego and then leave it behind? I don't believe that's the case, because that a fully functioning and healthy ego ultimately doesn't even exist. Because dysfunction is part of the ego. But it does seem to be the case that a child grows up at a certain age, 2 years old, 1.5 years old, to know when something starts to develop in them. Before, when they were 1 year old, they looked at you in beautiful. There was a light shining through their eyes. There were no concepts yet. There was no me image yet. And perhaps, although babies also have pain bodies, let's say it's a time when they're not screaming like mad. And they were just looking at you with that light shining through, and it was pure being, pure. And you look back into their eyes and you go, oh, wow, this is such a pure being here. Surely this baby is already fully enlightened. And you meet this baby again a year later, just as it's screaming, and say, "That's my toy, not yours. Give it back to me." It seems that they have to go through that. The concept of mine, their name, identifying with the first object, the toy, experiencing suffering when it breaks or it's taken away from them, because the ego is already growing. I identify with the first identification is my toy here. It's mine. Mine. And so can you tell a child at that stage, that is an illusion? You must let go of ego. It seems that humans have to develop an ego, and they do. Is it a healthy ego? Is it a well-functioning ego? Of course, some egos are more dysfunctional than others. That is true. But ultimately, if you remain stuck in ego, you will manifest